Okay, we'll call the workshop to order. And
Right on time.
it starts. It's on smart growth and sustainable communities, and we'll let you lead the way.
Okay, thank you. Our county has actually has received a number of grants over the years to pursue visioning activities and get a clear idea of what how the citizens would like to see the county grow and developed. And Pam Portwood is actually one of the leaders of those past activities. And that has actually moved us to the point where we're now planning a town plan for Crawfordville, which a coming workshop is going to address. But before we get to the specifics of a town plan, I thought it would be helpful for this board to just have a sort of a general introduction to smart growth and sustainable communities. And though I tried to get a few more illustrious speakers, we're fortunate to have John Sewell with Kimley Horn, a planner, to start off with a presentation. And then I'm going to give a presentation that I have pulled together from other people's presentations and some reputable websites. And then Luis Serna is with us. He's also a planner, LEED certified, and we're going to give him time to fill in any points that he thinks need to be made that John and I don't cover, and then we'll open it up to discussion. So I'd like John Sewell to go ahead and start.
Great. Thanks, Commissioners. I'm glad to be here tonight, talk about sustainability. And I think my approach in this presentation is going to be a little bit different than probably what you might have been expecting. I'm not going to be talking about LEED certification, and I'm not going to be talking about green building code. What I'm going to be talking about is good planning. I don't necessarily call it smart growth, and although I guess some people would. So basically what I'll be covering tonight is looking at ways to have a strong tie to land use and zoning. This presentation will touch on how infrastructure is provided and how it can be provided, which reduces costs. I'll talk about how projects are funded and how projects can be funded in the future, and the way that the DOTs of the world are looking to fund projects. And I'll be focusing in on community benefit, which it's kind of one of those gray areas where we have to be careful in terms of how we approach that. But generally speaking, community benefit is where we do something that benefits the community as a whole versus individuals. And I'll talk a lot about planning to address being multimodal, and multimodal is, of course, walking, biking, using cars, using buses, and that type of thing, as you all know. I heard this phrase at a planning conference once, and it really resonated with me. And this is really the foundation for what I'm going to be talking about here tonight. But the best tree huggers live in high rises downtown in a big city. And I don't think really it could be summed up any better than that. That the lowest impact to the earth would be to live in a 150-story apartment building in a large city. And it's all about the costs and the benefits. The problem is, and it's not necessarily a problem, but people have choices, and not everybody wants to live in a big high-rise in a big city. So we have to make choices along the way, and I'll talk about how some of these decisions are made. This is a chart that a planner drew. You can tell because it has nice words in it like viable, bearable, and equitable. But really what it means is that you have to have a balance between the economic benefits the environmental benefits and the social benefits. And when all those things come together and everybody's singing Kumbaya, right in the middle there somewhere is sustainable. And that's really the premise of this graphic. I think also sometimes when you're looking at a project or a development or an initiative and you're focusing solely on economic versus some of the other things, then you kind of move out of that sustainable realm and you work into things that affect the environment negatively or social issues negatively and vice versa. So you can't be too environmental, you can't be too economic, you got to have a good balance of all those. Before I kind of get into this, though, I think it's kind of important to talk a little bit about some of the history of how development occurs. And I think looking back to the turn of the last century, 1900, you basically had unregulated high-density growth development patterns. The first zoning was enacted in New York in 1916, and the reason for that was for health reasons. One of the famous cases for planners and for land use attorneys was the famous case of the village of Euclid, Ohio versus AMLO Realty Company. Basically, that case was upheld the fact that zoning was legal and viable as a means to separate uses. Some people back in that day thought of it as socialism, so kind of interesting history on zoning. Back in the 50s, the GI Bill came into effect. There was wide-scale home mortgages. They became the norm. Air conditioning became a commonplace in the average home. Back in 1951, a pretty landmark development in the United States was Levittown, which is located on Long Island, New York. And Levittown is still there today, but Levittown was the first real suburban type community that was built in the United States. And today I think the Levitts basically have laid it out pretty well. I know the villages down in Central Florida, about 4 years ago when they were at their peak of production, they were literally cranking out about 4,500 homes a year, if you can imagine that. My parents actually live in the villages. And I used to joke with them that when I would go down and visit with them, I'd come back the next day and there'd be a new house on their street. It's literally that developed. Back in the 80s, gated communities came in. Back in the 90s, there was a thing called new urbanism, which basically looked back to the 20s. So that was the idea of having smaller lots, having the community be walkable, bring back the sidewalks, and that type of thing. Make it walkable. Back in 2000, sustainability starts to take hold. You know, go green, the green thing started, and green has been building ever since. 2010, green is mainstream. And I would suspect in 10 years we probably won't be talking about green anymore because it will become indoctrinated in our building codes, our standards, and it really already is. And I think the point of this timeline chart here is just to kind of talk a little bit about how development thinking changes over time and how the new thing really becomes the norm. I think really the market plays a very strong role in all of this. And I think given a choice right now, people choose green. But what they will do is they will weigh in price and cost and value and all of that. But if there's a choice between something that's labeled green and not labeled green, they're going to jump on the green. According to the U.S. GBC, about 70% of consumers look for sustainability, green type practices in the products that they buy, especially in the housing products that they buy now. They associate it with cost savings first and also saving the earth second. Master plan communities are in high demand right now, or at least they were kind of leading up to the bust. And people will pay for amenities. A great example of this is the community of Southwood in Tallahassee. I don't know if there's anybody here that lives in Southwood, but you live in Southwood? I didn't think so. But Southwood's an interesting place, highly regulated. highly planned, right down to the colors that you're allowed to put on your house. And during the boom, people were flocking to Southwood, and they were paying 3 times as much taxes as they do in downtown Tallahassee. Kind of interesting. And it's all for the ability to be able to walk around in the community, be able to bike on the bike paths, and have open space. And really incentives have jump-started this whole process. It hasn't been mandated. It probably really won't be mandated, but really incentives are the way to go with all of this. A really good example of this is the Energy Star example. I think a lot of people are familiar with Energy Star. You go to Best Buy or Sears and you're buying a refrigerator, and there are refrigerators that are Energy Star and there are ones that are not. There are also other products that have the Energy Star rating system associated with them. But basically, this program began back in 1992. It's a U.S. EPA program. It was voluntary. It's for labeling and letting people know that products meet a certain criteria. It was really designed to curtail greenhouse gas emissions. Today, virtually all manufacturers have them. A lot of manufacturers just sell Energy Star appliances. And again, consumers, when they go to purchase a refrigerator or an air conditioner or even insulation for their home, they're looking for Energy Star because they associate that with a cost savings benefit to them. So again, it's market driven. There are tax credits that are applied to Energy Star. And it's a program that worked really well. The interesting thing about Energy Star is it's a lot like sustainability, and it's a lot like saying green. Eventually, Energy Star is just going to go away, and everything will be that efficient. Looking at best growth or best management practices, I'm going to talk a little bit about compact design, connecting to surroundings, parks, recreation, and open space, and best practices for the provision of infrastructure, and I'm going to talk about multimodalism. First of all, compact design. I'll talk quite a bit about this, but it really is a best management practice for your planning. And it's one of the things that a lot of the newer communities have started to figure out. The diagram to the top and the bottom are kind of interesting. The diagram at the bottom actually shows the standard suburban development pattern with a cul-de-sac, dead-end streets, kind of a limited transportation network. In order to get from one place to the next, you got to go out to the main road type situation. The one to the top does all the same things. It's just condensed down. The lots are smaller. The density is higher per acre, but it nets you some open space that you can use for other things. I think some of the trends that I'm seeing out there for open space, a lot of it's recreation-based, but there's also kind of some new movements where the open space is actually used for things like organic gardening. The community could have a community garden where they have organic gardening. It's very low impact. There's no pesticides involved in that, so it's good for the environment, and it actually nets them some return on their land. But basically, this type of design lowers the infrastructure costs because you're actually spreading pipes and roads and sidewalks out over a smaller area. It allows for larger green spaces. It lowers transportation costs, and one of the big culprits in the whole cost mechanism in suburbia is trip lengths. And a lot of people don't realize when you live out in a periphery type area how long those trip lengths really are. So it reduces travel times, reduces trip lengths, reduces consumption, and it also reduces the amount of time you actually have to spend in a car. Because a lot of your trips, so most of your daily trips are actually short in terms of going to the drugstore, stopping off at the grocery store, and those types of things. So it lowers a lot of those costs. It makes walking and biking possible, and I would also add transit to that because of the compact nature of it. One of the things that transit needs to operate is density, and so it also helps with that.
Don, when you say denser lots, I assume you mean less than a half acre, right?
Yeah, it could be less than a half an acre, it could be less than a quarter of an acre.
Because most of our, as you know, future land use is urban 1, and it's been very problematic having anyone change it to urban 2, which is 10 to the acre.
That's right.
I hope everyone's listening.
Yeah, and I think that that's a great point. I think in some cases, in the Crawfordville case, for example, I think that's one of the things that we heard from the public is they're willing to accept more density in the Crawfordville area to achieve some of these things and some of the public involvement that we've heard.
What I've seen in the past, though, whenever somebody wants to do that, they get a lot of pushback.
Pushback from the community?
Yes.
Yeah.
And from DCA.
Well, DCA, I think, is another matter, and I think the DCA question will probably go away when the plan is completed because it's gone through the process. And I think it's pretty clear to us in our discussions is that there might even be the need for a higher density land use category than you have right now.
When you say the plan, you mean the Crawfordville plan?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Is that actually going to be integrated into the comp plan?
The direction that we're headed with that is that it's going to change first some of the land development code. And after the land development code is changed, at some point later, it may affect the future land use element in the future land use map itself to accommodate all that. Okay. Connected to surroundings. This type of planning basically makes it easier to connect to commercial and work areas. It also allows for, it gets you closer to recreation and open spaces. Again, it reduces trip lengths and allows for more efficient trip chaining. And trip chaining is, you leave work, you stop off here, you stop off at another location, and you're basically chaining your trips together versus making separate trips. And it's a lot more common when there's a compact design situation. These graphics down on the bottom are kind of interesting. Back at the turn of the century, roads were always laid out in what we call a grid network. And I think later on, mid-century, some of the suburban designs were really designed to have limited access into the neighborhood. And the thinking was, well, if we limit access into our neighborhood, we're limiting crime, it keeps unwanted people out of our neighborhood, and it's just a much better thing. Well, the problem with that, and again, I'm not condemning that, I'm not criticizing that, because I think the market shows that there's still a demand for cul-de-sacs. Some people like living on cul-de-sacs, and I think cul-de-sacs will continue. But the disadvantage of that is that when you're actually going from point A to point B, it's never a direct route. You have to go out to the main road, then you have to go back into a different part of the neighborhood. The problem with that is you're actually impacting that highway. And it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. And I think anytime maybe we've been on vacation or been to an old city, you notice that the grid network is highly efficient in terms of getting around, especially as a pedestrian, because the trips are so much shorter getting from one location to another. Imagine, if you will, if that was a piece of yarn and you stretched it out and compared it to this one would be an awful lot longer. I'm going to talk a lot about parks, recreation, and open space because it's so important from a sustainability standpoint. And basically it encourages exercise. It's definitely good for all ages. I'll talk a little bit later about that. But walking trails are the most popular amenity for retiring Americans. Surprisingly, it's not golf. And basically they're a survey of retirement-age persons done by Arizona State University. And of course, they have a real eye on retirement communities because aside from Florida, Arizona is probably one of the biggest retirement states in the country, but it's very similar to Florida. But this survey found that among retired-age people, trails for walking, hiking, and biking was the #1 amenity on their list. It's what they look for. And second, interestingly, was recreation centers with exercise equipment, flexible home space. Down at number 5 is golf courses. which is kind of interesting, and then shops and retail shops is the 6th on the list. So it's very surprising results, and I know that when we stereotypically kind of think about a retirement community, we're thinking about golf. A lot of them still have golf, but they also have to incorporate these trails for walking and biking. I mentioned earlier the villages in Central Florida. The villages actually started out as a golf community, and what happened was, it was really interesting. Over time, they figured out that people preferred to get around in the community on their golf carts or by walking or on a bike. And so what they actually did over time was they converted their golf cart paths into multi-use paths, and now those multi-use paths, they're not 12 feet, they're almost 16 feet wide, designed to accommodate a couple of golf carts passing, bikes, and people walking. And so they've incorporated these multimodal paths all throughout their community. These are just some kind of interesting statistics about walking paths and recreation. But basically a trail, basically 75% of real estate agents believe that the trail is a positive influence on real estate values. They've been known to add $5,000 to the price of homes that are adjacent to these facilities. They're charging per premium being located on a greenway. And a lot of people show a lot of great interest in these types of trails. So it's very important to kind of think about that as a county, how you're incorporating those in as a countywide system. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about infrastructure. Basically, compact development results in sewer systems being less expensive, and I'll also throw into that more viable. Certainly, it's fewer miles of roadways from an infrastructure standpoint. It means less maintenance, less resurfacing, and that type of thing. As I showed you from that trip example, it results in less demand on your arterials. So as you develop these types of developments off of 319, it will actually result in less demand from those communities onto 319. It makes sidewalks more feasible and usable because the trip distances are shorter, and it results in less stormwater runoff. Again, multimodal is really important. It allows this type of development allows walking, biking, transit. I know that in the future, as Crawfordville develops and becomes more populated as it has, I think the county is going to be kind of interested in teaming with Star Metro to maybe get some type of express service up to Tallahassee. And so compact development makes it a lot easier just from a density standpoint. But people are going to shift modes when the convenience levels are there. So if it's a long distance across town, they're just not going to do it. They're going to take their cars. And again, just some of the benefits of this, it's lower operating costs, lower consumption, and healthier living. And, I use that Southwood example. Frankly, that's why people live there. It's for the healthy lifestyle. The downside, I want to be real clear, there is certainly a downside to everything. There are higher initial costs to the construction of this type of development. And so, you need to be thinking about things like typically these types of developments have curb and gutter, you need to have stormwater systems and those types of things, so there's a higher cost associated with it. Just kind of talking about some of the trends. I talked about the trends in development and the trends. I think there are trends in sustainability. It's kind of interesting when you kind of look back, way back in history, we had big cars. Then they got even bigger. And then Honda came along with their little Civic, and in the 70s reached us, and gas prices shot up during the recession of the 70s, and so the small car kind of came in. Then we had the big SUV of the 80s and the 90s, so we still see a few of those around. We still have the hybrid cars, but I think it's really interesting now that 10 years ago, you would have never seen an ad on television about an electric car. But now all of the manufacturers are producing an electric car. So it's kind of interesting. We've gone full circle And I think as time changes, the electric car will take place. It'll actually change a lot of things of the way we develop. There'll need to be special parking places. I know there are already people out selling systems so that plug-in cars can actually plug in, and the municipalities can actually charge a rate for the electricity that's used. Now, the problem with that from a sustainability standpoint is most of the power that we use is generated from coal and coal-fired power plants, so it's really not that sustainable yet. But as we look to the future, maybe look at ways to change the way that energy is provided. Funding, I think it's really important to think about this. We actually are starting to team with a company by the name of Clary Consulting, and I think it's kind of an interesting thing to bring up. Lowell Clary was the former assistant secretary with the Department of Transportation, and his specialty is finding funding for projects. It's really interesting talking to Lowell because he goes around to local governments all over the state of Florida talking about how to get big roadway projects done, typically. Now, some of them are transit projects, but for the most part, he's dealing with roadway projects. Lowell talks about it. I kind of coined the phrase, but turning over every rock is how we need to look at funding for these types of projects. But for any kind of project, taking a turn every rock over approach is the way to go. And I think partnerships are where it's at. Public-private partnerships, looking at grants. I know a lot of smaller communities just look at grants. COAs, looking at CRAs for specific areas. I know there were some people that brought up the idea of doing a CRA for the Crawfordville area. And I think it's an interesting approach and maybe one worth investigating. With CRAs, you have the ability to bond projects, large projects, if you have a documented revenue stream from the CRA. Partnering with DOT, partnering with DEP, but I think most importantly probably partnering with DOT in your all's case. And I think one of the things that Lowell would tell you if he was here, and he's probably the best known expert in the state, is using some type of mechanism, whether it's impact fees or concurrency, to fund projects. And what DOT is looking for is they are looking for communities that have some level of money that they can bring to the table to get a project done. And I think one of the things that Lowell let me know and reminded me of is that communities who don't bring anything to the table aren't going to get anything. And I know it's not what you all probably wanted to hear tonight, but I think having some type of a mechanism to do those types of projects is really important. And I know that some people say, well, you know, Tallahassee doesn't charge impact fees. That's true. But virtually, you know, let's face it, most of the roads in Leon County are over capacity, so what a lot of developers end up paying is concurrency fees, and some of them are pretty significant. And frankly, that's how Leon County has actually been able to fund a lot of the big projects that they've been able to do, such as Mahan Road is a great example of that. They basically took all of their concurrency fees that they were charging for a wide area, and they focused them in on what they call a significant benefit corridor, and they funneled all of those funds into that corridor, and they took that money and they went to DOT, they partnered with DOT, and they got that road widened from a 2-lane road to its current configuration, which is a 4-lane road. So that's how they got that project done. It was kind of interesting when the project was bid out. It came in way under what they were estimating, and they ended up taking those dollars and actually doing a lot of different projects with that money. So turn over every rock and partner with your partners as much as you can to get things done. Just some considerations for Wakulla County. You know, the Crawfordville Town Plan is going to result in some recommendations for land development code changes. We can talk about that. A lot of the sustainable practices will be recommended in that plan as incentives, not requirements. So I just want to make that clear. y'all should be looking at possibly establishing a long-term plan for recreation, open space, and multi-use trails throughout the county. I know you guys are working on that now. I would just encourage y'all to continue to do that and maybe come up with an overall plan for the county so you can continue to move in that direction. Capitalize on all the overall strengths of the county. I think you all know what those are. I don't have to tell you what they are, but you know, certainly ecotourism is one of the things that kind of always floats up to the top of the list. Support the implementation strategies that will achieve these. So once you know what you want to do, establish those strategies and carry it out, and partner with the agencies who can help you get it done. And I guess what we'll do is I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Arts, and then we can have a discussion at the end. Is that correct? Unless you have any
Unless
questions.
there's some burning questions now you want to ask John?
Do you think your fancy road man on your staff can help us get more money for roads in the near future? Sincere question.
Not without anything on the table. That's what he
I'd be
said.
glad to bring them down here to talk with y'all.
Okay.
Okay. I have a presentation called Smart Growth and Sustainable Communities. I'm going to flip quickly through some of the slides. If it's too fast for some of you, I can get you either copies of hard copies or electronic copies.
Bill, let Marianne. Thank you. Thank you, Bill.
As we all know, development decisions affect all aspects of people's lives. If you focus on the second bullet here, growth is smart when it gives us great communities with more choices, good return on public investment, greater opportunities, thriving natural environment, and a legacy that we're proud to leave behind. Smart growth is in many ways the antithesis to sprawl and leads to a pleasanter quality of life. For me, some of the main reasons why smart growth is important is that it creates vibrant communities, it's better for the environment, and this is something I want to make sure this board fully appreciates, that it makes more economic sense for county governments. It reduces your infrastructure costs and you get greater return on investment. And I'm going to show you several analyses that illustrate that. The first is actually from one of our neighbors to the north in the planning department there, Sherry Horn. She looked, oops, where'd my slides go?
Yes.
Oh, okay. She looked at what the expected population increase is going to be in Leon County over some period of time, and translated to how many households that would be. And then she looked at how many square miles of roads those new households would need, how many square miles of land those new households would need, how many roads would be needed to serve them. Okay. And then she thought about what the cost would be if all those new households were added to Leon County with the typical development patterns that are in place. Low density developments on the periphery or on the fringe. And so here was her first calculation, using a 1 unit per acre density, and you can see she calculated how many miles of roads and what the cost would be. She did the same thing for 2 units per acre, 8 units per acre, and 20 units per acre. And I've put that all together into a table so you can see how dramatically different the costs are. that if you have low-density sprawl on the outskirts of your urban areas, it's extremely expensive infrastructure for the county to provide. And think, this is just road costs. The same thing applies: sewer, water, electricity, miles that law enforcement, fire, EMS, school buses are going to have to travel. All of those expenses are much greater when you have this more low-density sprawling development on the periphery. So the conclusion of her analysis was that in order to reduce infrastructure costs for government, growth needs to occur close to the central nodes. And it's not that people can't build further out, but there needs to be a recognition that there are substantial costs with doing that. And maybe this is kind of why, when we were talking about impact fees, I like the idea of having impact fees for the far-flung development and waiving them for the development within the central nodes. There are 10 principles of smart growth that were identified by the Smart Growth Network, and this is their website. I'm going to go through each one real quickly, and I took some pictures from their website that help to illustrate these. There's a little overlap with what John said, but there's some other points. Mixing land uses is a critical component of smart growth, and it makes viable alternatives to driving. And as an example, here, this is Colorado, but this was a former gas station site, half an acre, right across from the courthouse. We've got a couple of those. And they took this site and developed it into a multi-story block, a multi-use block that had retail, offices, and residential townhomes. And they modeled it after the existing architecture at the top. They put the stores and offices out on the primary street and the homes in the back. And then they used space really well. They had a parking structure, and they put courtyards on top of it. So multi-use is something we're really going to have to make sure we have in our downtown Crawfordville. And really any developments that are going to be substantial. Otherwise, if it's all residential, people can't do anything except get in their car when they want to shop, drive to work, seek entertainment or recreation. Compact building design, John talked about a little bit. This really makes more efficient use of land and preserves open space. It's not so much about increasing density per se, but for a given piece of land, you increase the density on part of the land so that you can leave the other part of the land open. And some of the ways to do that: clustering, growing vertically rather than horizontal, having structured parking rather than surface parking. And there are many benefits to doing this. People in these kind of communities don't feel so as if they're crowded because there is open space. So even though there's higher density, the open space seems to offset that. Open space like parks and public squares. The third principle of smart growth is creating walkable communities. If you go to the fourth bullet, if we want walkable communities, we need to have mixed land uses, we need to build compactly, and we need to make sure that we have safe and inviting pedestrian corridors. Here in a residential area, you can see that having narrow lots, sidewalks, narrow streets, front porches, those are all things that help to make a residential neighborhood pedestrian friendly. In a more urban area, you'll note that the building is close to the street. The there's on-street parking, there's a wide sidewalk, there are trees and furniture to sit on. This on the far right is another example of a very pedestrian-friendly area with large windows for window shopping. But one of the things I really like is if you look on the left, see the cars coming out? It's coming out of a parking lot that you don't see. That is a parking deck or garage, not a lot, and it's hidden in the center of that block. So all your retail and residences are around it, but parking is convenient and accessible, and that's something we could do in Crawfordville. Here's another example. This is an apartment building. The front of it is designed to look like townhomes, and they're wide and not very deep because this also has a parking garage in the center of the block. I think, as John alluded to, people will pay extra money to be able to walk, to live in communities that are walkable communities. Another principle of smart growth is providing a variety of transportation options. And one of the real concerns here about is becoming multimodal because of the congestion due to our reliance on cars and the way we've developed to be so car-centered. Congestion is, it's been an increasing problem for decades. It wastes a lot of valuable time, and you can't fix this problem just by building more roads. And I know every time I hear people all talking about how important it is to 4-lane 319, if we continue to develop the way this county's been developing, and if we don't start to move toward public transit as well, by the time we get to a 4-lane 319, I guarantee you people will be begging for 6 lanes. I've seen that happen in a number of communities. There's also the expense. Households spend a large proportion of their income on transportation. And I think for people in Crawfordville, that's probably even more true than in other communities. This slide's kind of complicated, but if you look at the the 2 dark bars, the 2 darkest ones, that's comparing the transportation, the energy use from transportation for a conventional suburban development versus a transit-oriented development, one that's convenient to express bus service or something like that. And you can see that how much more energy is used, how much more expensive it is for people who are not in transit-oriented development. And in terms of sustainability, the other part of it relates to home energy expenditures, and those are much higher for single-family detached as compared to single-family attached or multifamily homes. Another principle of smart growth is to create a range of housing choices. And that means within any new development, it shouldn't all just be, single homes. Or there needs to be a mix of multifamily structures in there. And even existing neighborhoods need to be retrofitted. There's a good example of that here from Colorado. Not that we have much in common with Aspen, but this is an extremely expensive resort community. The workers can't afford to live there. They all have huge commutes to get to their work in Aspen. So what they did was developed, this is affordable housing specifically for workers. You have to qualify with a certain income level. But these are designed to look like the typical single-family homes that you see in Aspen, even though they're apartment buildings. So it fits in with the neighborhood, but you can see on the inside people have their own separate entrances and they have a courtyard area and so forth. So there are creative ways to do it, to provide that mix without changing the character of an area. This one is, I think, a very important principle. We need to foster a distinctive, attractive community with a strong sense of place. And hopefully distinctive in a positive way, not distinctive by your ugliness. But this is a California community, and this is a new downtown. They changed their downtown from a wider street to a perpendicular, more walkable street, and it's funky looking, but you're going to remember this town as you drive through it or after you've left it. And I'd like people to, when they leave Sopchoppy, I think they kind of have that sense. But when they leave Crawfordville, I don't think they feel that way right now, that there's a distinctive sense of place. The other thing this same community did, which I thought was really cool, is they have 96 of these little cottages. Well, in the downtown, they set aside, this is that compact design where they set aside a park area and moved the homes to 10 units per acre. But you can do really charming things. It's going to take some political will to do some architectural codes, but if you look, when we get to that survey, people here said they supported that. Another principle of smart growth is to direct development toward existing communities. We've kind of already talked about that, about concentrating development in where your nodes are and not out sprawling. Somewhat related to that is preserving open space farmland. There are many benefits, including financial benefits, for doing that. Now, most of us are familiar with these kind of developments that are really large scale, and they set aside, in this case, 393 acres, a good chunk of it wetlands and so forth. So we've seen that kind of thing done. But this one in Georgia I thought was especially interesting because this is a small development. It's just 21 acres. And they set aside half of that property as open space. They put 67 homes clustered together, all with pedestrian biking kind of connections. And then the people actually had input into what they wanted in the open space, and they wanted a village green. There's a spring with a wildlife habitat. They wanted organic gardens and an orchard and so forth. And this is 4 miles from Atlanta, so I think there are people who would love to live in something like that here. Okay, I've got a couple more. These are, they move kind of quickly. The first one, every time I look at Winn-Dixie parking lot, I keep trying to think, what are we going to do about that? The first scenario shows a deserted mall that was, over time, redesigned into a really nice downtown area. And so that may be something, whoops, we're going to be able to do these.
You might need to send us the links.
Yeah, that, it goes kind of, oh, there it is. But it goes kind of quickly. There, see, now they've put in a street and sidewalks and trees, more stores. So they took that big open parking lot and converted it into more of like city streets. And with Winn-Dixie still staying there, we could do something like that if we develop other parking alternatives in our downtown. Okay, the next one is, whenever I think about 319 being 4-laned and splitting the center of Crawfordville, I know John has some ideas for how we can deal with that, but this next example shows, oops, you can see
I've actually got pictures of that for our 319.
yeah, but it's not, wait, there's more trees coming. So I think there are restrictions on what DOT will let us do, but anyway, it shows, sometimes when I get discouraged about, oh goodness, you know, we're saddled with all this stuff, now how are we going to fix it? There's hope. And this, we have a lot of places that remind me of this, whether they're the storage centers or places set way back, old they've got Frisbee, then they end up converting it to a really nice fountain gathering place. So, okay, so we can make those things happen here, no matter what your starting point. All right, my next slide. John made this point. There's good acceptance of smart growth in the market. There's, you know, some studies that have shown that smart growth communities command a higher market value on a per square foot basis. Oh my goodness, where'd I go?
I'm trying to get back for you.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. And there's another study that looked at resale appreciation and found that that the smart growth communities did a little better than the conventional ones when it came to resale. This analysis is hard to read on one slide, but Sarasota really looked at its return on investment, where they looked at the county's property tax revenue per acre, and where was the county getting the biggest bang for its property tax buck. And residential property inside the city did better than residential property out in the county. And then, this was kind of surprising, big box stores such as Walmart and Sam's Club produced barely more county property tax revenue per acre than a single-family home, and that was partly because of the large acreage with parking lots and so forth. Among retail properties, the biggest revenue came from the Southgate Mall, which was a high-end mall, and that was yielding $22,000 per acre. But the biggest return on investment came from a 3/4 of an acre multi-use high-rise project, and that brought in $800,000 per acre, and if you add in city taxes, it was $1.2 million, and more than the Walmart Supercenter and the high-end mall combined. As John said, not everybody wants to live in a high-rise, and I don't think Crawfordville ever wants high-rises, but they even had low-rise up to 3 stories, with residential over retail was bringing in $70,000 per acre, more than 3 times the mall. So, you know, if we develop Crawfordville right, that could be an extremely good return on investment. It'll have low infrastructure costs and high property tax yield per acre. There's a pretty compelling economic rationale, I think. Now, I'm really excited about this new LEED program. Most of you know about LEED for buildings. This is a way of evaluating neighborhood development, and it gives points for criteria such as reducing the need to drive and using less land to create more benefits. Now, there are ways, and I'd like to look at them for how our county might be able to use this, maybe as part of our planning process for approving new developments, and also for creating some kinds of incentives or tax breaks. Now, I've spent most of my time on smart growth. John talked a fair amount about sustainable communities. But I think some key points about sustainable communities is they need to be walkable, and transportation is key. Now, do Wakulla County citizens want smart growth? I gave you all a copy of a survey that was done in 2005, a representative survey. And yeah, it's a little old, but I don't think the county's population has changed all that much. And if you look through that, it is pretty compelling that the citizens in this county, at least in 2005, wanted to see clustered development in our town center of Crawfordville, St. Mark's, South Choppy. They didn't want to see sprawling growth all along 319. And so this is a map of Wakulla, and I've identified the 6 nodes that I think are either clearly established or developing. And so for me, smart growth is all about trying to direct multi-use developments using compact design and all that kind of stuff into or as close to those areas as possible. And as policymakers, trying to use all the tools we can to encourage people to build in those areas and discourage people from building other places. And the last thing, in checking out all these websites, I came across this Sustainable Communities Building Blocks program. They're looking for 20 communities to kind of test out some tools. And we would have to be considered, we would have to send in a 2-page letter of interest by February 23rd. And one of your items gives you those, it gives you that request for letters of interest. They have 8 tools, and they want to just do 1 tool per community to come and provide some technical, or 1-day technical assistance. And if you look at tool 4, it says Smart Growth Zoning Codes for Small Cities and Rural Areas. This workshop will offer a menu of quick fixes local governments can make to their zoning codes to promote smart growth tailored for small cities and rural areas. So I would like to know whether there's, can't bring this up at an agenda meeting, but whether there would be consensus here to go ahead and at least send a letter off and see if we would be selected.
Follow me. Oh, it doesn't cost anything.
Doesn't cost anything.
I have some comments on where you've been, but
Okay.
are you ready for comments?
There's still a third presenter.
Well, we're going to get
Okay, go ahead.
Luis to come and say a few words of wisdom and then open it up to discussion.
That'll be good.
I'll say very few words. You've had a lot of information thrown at you this evening, and I know it's a lot to absorb, and I don't have a presentation or anything. Our firm has been involved in a number of sustainable community developments, and it's an initiative that we've taken on, promoting it because that's where we see the market going. So, we see the market changing, and we see that there is going to be this sort of development. And I commend you for having this discussion. And really, I just want to present myself as a strong proponent of what you're talking about, and also a resource should you need it. Really, what we're talking about in a nutshell is designing for people. For years, we've designed for roads and for traffic. We've designed for outdated zoning codes, but what smart growth involves is designing for people, and I just want you to keep that in mind. It's not for everybody, but I'd like for you to consider that, given that the market is changing, that you give people the opportunity to build these sorts of developments. We believe private developers, when development will returns, it'll be different than what Wakulla's seen. It'll be different from what Florida's seen. It's just not going to be the same type of development. The market just can't sustain that anymore. And we believe that it is going to be more along the lines of smart growth. And if your codes are ready, you'll have the ability to accommodate these sorts of developments. I just wanted to share a quick story. Tallahassee is in the process of updating its codes for the downtown to allow more sustainable communities. And in the presentation, they gave some pictures of types of developments around town that they like and they want to promote. And then they showed developments that they did not want to see. And the ironic thing that someone pointed out at the end of that is all the developments that they pointed out that they wanted to see were developed prior to the current comprehensive plan. And all the developments that they didn't want to see were legally built under the existing codes. And that's part of the problem, I think, is the codes allow development that, legally allow development that it's not desirable, it's not sustainable. And so we'd like for you to consider, as a part of this, amending your codes to allow more of the smart growth, more of the sustainable developments. As I said, it's been an initiative at our firm to look at promoting these sorts of developments, and as part of that, we took a tour of some sustainable communities throughout the Northeast, and it won over a lot of skeptics just being in those communities. They're vibrant communities that are places that you'd want to live. I have older parents that I'm getting concerned that they're not going to be able to drive much longer, and that's a real concern. And if they had an option to live in a community where there were opportunities for them to have recreation, to shop, it would just be good for them, and it's a good opportunity. And I'd just like to indicate that we're a strong proponent of this, and again, we think it'll be for the good of the community because that's where we see development going. Thank you.
Thank you. You want to lead a discussion, or?
Well, before we go on that, I don't know what our goal time is. I think you writing a letter on our behalf would be welcomed by all of us. I don't think any of us object to that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mr. Moore, you had some comments?
I have a few comments, Ms. Arts. I don't have any problem with good growth. I have a problem when you're telling somebody where you're going to grow and how you're going to grow. Anybody who wants to build a 4-story here and they decorate it properly, I don't have any problem with that. One thing's for sure, though, as you were talking about people. If you don't have the people, it's not like a ball field. If you build it, they'll come. If you don't have the commercial follows the people. It's not the people following the commercial. You got to have the people before you build a commercial, unless you want to invest your money. I won't invest my money unless I've got the people first. Everything that's coming to Crawfordville comes because of the number of people that we have. The development, I'm going to do this quickly, and I'm so sorry that I have to do this, but in each of the places that you mentioned here in your, you have Boulder, Colorado. Boulder, Colorado is one of the most trendy towns in Colorado. It's a university town and it's a ski town. In Boulder, Colorado, if you can find anything under $500,000 to $3 million, we're not a $500,000 town. We spent $3 million on a courthouse. That is our town center. The courthouse is our town center. We don't have a square that we can redecorate. We don't have any old buildings going up and down 319 that we can decorate. It would be good if we had.
Okay, and just so people know, I found these were easy to find examples from the website. It wasn't that I saw them necessarily as being
That's
similar to Crawfordville.
that's all right.
But I
You-
thought they had some good lessons.
Oh, wonderful. Town Center in Plano, Texas. I've been there. It's where J.R. Moody was found. It's a suburban community of Dallas. Extremely expensive. Big, nice buildings, nice streets. Bethesda, Maryland, the most trendy part of Washington, D.C. You have got to have big bucks to live in Bethesda, Maryland. Lots of people. You got to have lots of people and big bucks. Boca Raton, same thing. The Benedict Commons, Aspen, goes without saying, Aspen again. Jupiter, Florida. You know, these are great things. Everybody would like to live in these places. We have no income in Crawfordville that could even support that. And you mentioned this nice place on East Lake Commons in Decatur, Georgia. I live very close to there. Without huge amounts of government money, that would never have occurred. They took a
It was a blighted neighborhood.
you bet. They took a blighted neighborhood and built it was an old Bobby Jones golf course. They redid the golf course and they spent $1 zillion in that neighborhood. That would never have happened without government money. And, you know, that's...
But the example of that was just setting aside. It was an example of compact building where you took 21 acres and you clustered
That's
your
true.
67 homes and left 11 acres
Lots
free.
of people and lots
It
of
doesn't
money.
matter where it is or how
That's
much,
correct.
you know.
That's
That
correct.
was the information.
Lots
So-
of people and lots of money.
Ms. Sarks, I had Jessica pull this up on the community code. Most of our Crawfordville is urban 1 right now, correct? And if you look at the definition for urban 1, it says, when full urban services are in place, the area designated for urban 1 shall be converted to urban 2 through the plan amendment process. It says shall. That's never been done. It was tried to be done when Ed Mills was here. I don't know if you remember. There were flyer was sent out to everybody saying they're going to put 10 mobile homes per acre next to you, show up, and the board meeting was packed out. You remember that?
Oh, yeah.
They tried to do it. They tried to get the Crawfordville area, urban 2, and it was a complete dog mess. It's nice that we're talking about this. And I also represented a client, Miss Betty Pittman, has 5 acres on Trice Lane, close to Crawfordville. I wanted to get future land use to urban 2 from urban 1. It was turned down. Well, no, we're not going to do that because of traffic. So, and let me give you another example. Right behind where the old Lindy's was, you know, I'm talking about across from Ace Hardware, a lot directly behind it, they came in to get it rezoned commercial. I mean, it's no more than 40 feet off the pavement. You know what I'm talking about. They were turned down. They said, no, we don't want commercial in our neighborhood. So the reality on the ground is that we all, I think we all agree with that, and we all can get in a group and we can say, here's what we want. Okay, now it's time to do so. Oh, no, don't do that now. Don't increase our density. If you increase the density in Crawfordville, which it says right here we shall do, then these types of higher densities would start occurring. But if you would recommend doing a comp plan amendment, doing the Crawfordville area to urban 2, I'd be behind you 100%. But I'd like to see that happen.
Well, I'm going to defer to Lindsay and Heather and John Sewell because I know they're planning, and at our next workshop you'll hear more about this, developing a special overlay district that then you make changes to the usual zoning and other restrictions that would apply. And I don't know what the process is for doing that. I'm going to defer to them on that.
Ask Lindsay a question then.
But some of it, one big difference that I see is that rather than piecemeal, like one developer coming and wanting to do one thing here, this is part of developing a whole plan, and that there's been a lot of community buy-in and input all along the way. And, you know, if it's seen as part of if, especially with visuals that I think we're working on, so that people can see where there will be the density, but also where there will be a town square and things like that, then I think it is doable.
Is it correct to say we can zone all we want, but if the future land use is urban 1, you're going to get 2 units to the acre?
Yeah, you're going to have to, as part of the Crawfordville overlay, we're going to have to take a look at the land use.
Okay, well, it's
And-
not, we can zone it whatever we want to, but if the future land use says urban 1, it's 2 units to the acre for residential. We couldn't build a
Well, you really shouldn't be rezoning, you can't rezone property that's in conflict with
So
the
I would
allowable
think
densities.
step 1 would be to, future land use would be to change it to urban 2. What does this statement mean to you that it says it shall be converted?
Well, I think shall means you shall.
I know other people that
Um,
use that word shall in the comp plan.
But
say,
honestly, I don't
we're going to
think-
sue you if you don't do it.
I don't think that our existing land use categories at the end of the day, depending on the results of the town plan, I don't think that the existing land use categories you have, even urban 2, are
Agreed.
going to be sufficient. I think we're going to need to look at
Downtown or something like that.
some sort of
Yeah.
And
new...
It's my personal opinion that we don't have a future land use plan. We have a current land use plan. We don't have a future land use plan. They went in and said, here's what everybody's doing, let's get their land use to that. There was, I don't want to disparage whoever did it, but I think it's pretty obvious that it's a present land use plan.
That's the whole state of Florida.
Right.
But Ms. Arch could get the ball rolling by making a motion that we change Crawford to urban 2 then.
I think we're,
I think
and I think that's
we're
coming
maybe
after
looking at
the,
a new category.
Can I just maybe add something to what Lindsay said, as far as the process goes? I mean, I think I appreciate what you're saying, Commissioner, you're absolutely right on the money. The Crawfordville Town Plan, though, I think is a little bit different approach than what was taken on some of those specific site-by-site rezonings and plan changes, plan amendments. The purpose of the plan is basically we can actually use that plan as part of the justification to change the future land use designation. What it shows is it shows community buy-in. We did workshops. We had a charrette. We're having another meeting. There's been public involvement for this thing all the way through. The general consensus is, through the visual aids that we've used along the way, is that people liked what they saw, they're in support of it, they want the downtown feel of Crawfordville. That's only one part of it, though. The other part of it is, before any future land use designations are changed, we're going to have to go through the process. And the process is, that would involve a large-scale amendment, and currently, that means DCA review. Now, DCA review might be changing pretty significantly here in the next few months. And I think as we move in that direction, I think the last language that I saw that was distributed to me by APA this morning, that whole process might change significantly, such that it may be easier for y'all to move in that direction. So I don't know how that'll end up, but even if you do have to still go through that process, we can work through that process by looking at what the capacities are, what infrastructure you need to support it, and it may have to actually be done, phased in over time. You mentioned town center land use that we might come up with, or whatever we call that. It actually could be the equivalent of urban 3 or urban 4. But the point is, you can actually do that over time based on the plan that we've developed. And I think that's the important part is, right now we're dealing with the fact that we have a plan, whereas before, on a site-by-site basis, DCA is going to take a very critical eye to a site-by-site plan change. So hopefully that helps to answer it.
Are y'all looking at recommending new comp plan designations with this Crawfordville plan? Or?
Absolutely.
Well, that's where we're going to put our money where our mouth is.
Yeah.
They guys come up and want densities of 50 units to the acre. Like you said, the political will, we'll have to support it.
Well, let's have a workshop March 10th. We'll hear more about it.
I have a little problem with density myself. when you increase your density, you've got Southwood up here, right behind the Walgreens, I guess. You've got some condominiums and so forth. They have a single-car carport. You can barely, in the late afternoon, you can barely drive between the homes are very close, and we're a 3 and a 4 car world, and we've got a single car drive, and I can't. It amazes me. You got to park on the street. You get one car in the driveway, then everybody else parks on the street. You're talking about green. The ordinary person in the really, really nice neighborhoods, people can afford green, but the ordinary person can't afford green. They can afford pieces of green, but they just can't afford the whole 9 yards of green. Green is very expensive to go green.
Green saves you money on energy.
Hey, let me tell you, I believe in green. I built my home in green. I got the greenest house in the county, and my electric bill is nothing. But I'm telling you, the person out here buying it, the ordinary home, can't afford the green. The automobile and the air conditioning has changed the way people live. In the old days, when you had a town square, people lived around the town, and they walked around the town because they didn't have automobiles. And they sat on their porches in the afternoon. We don't do that anymore. We get in our car and drive as close to Winn-Dixie as we can get, and get out and run into an air-conditioned building and come back and get in our car and go back to our house where it's air-conditioned. Ideally, everybody would have a porch. Porches are wonderful things. I have what's called a rotten apple syndrome. Where I came from, we had developers who would build tight, 0 lot lines. What happened there, and condominiums, duplexes, whatever, when you have that many people crowded together, unless it's an extremely upscale, expensive community with restrictions, you get Joe Jones that raises his car up on jacks and start changing the oil. His friends come over and play music beside his car. The first thing you know, the nice little old lady that lives next to him moves. And then on the other side of that, she moves. And then who comes in next to these guys? Same people that are just like them. So this thing tends to just spread out. When you pack people together, if it's not a highly restricted, expensive community, you will soon have a community that's in the pits. And I can show those to you. I've been there.
Right, but I mean, those are important concerns. I think some of what, at least I was talking about, though, is not so much packing people together as much as making sure you have multi-use, so there's retail and whatever mixed with housing and office and whatever, and that you also have a lot of open space, so that some things are close, but then they're big open spaces. And I think that helps to address some of the things I think that you're talking about.
Somebody, if you don't crowd them together, somebody has to pay for that open space. Somebody has to pay for the bike trails. And you pay for that by crowding people together and then having whatever. When you're talking about walkable, talkable communities, you got to have, 25,000 people per square mile to get people walking. The only way my wife is going to walk is if she can't drive. If she can't drive, she will have to walk, and she isn't going to shop where she has to walk.
I've heard other people say that, walkable communities are a thing of the past, and that's not something that will work here. But you've seen some data that shows that people are seeking out, they're even willing to pay more money to live in those kind of communities. And I forgot the other point I was going to make. Go ahead, Al.
I think that there's a desire in Wakulla County to see some sort of downtown in Crawfordville. I think you'll see. I think there'll be an effort. I know I'll support the effort to try and encourage our design elements to encourage people to walk, where you have buildings closer to the road with a sidewalk so that people can walk from place to place. I'm looking forward to that. I will agree with Jerry, 100% Commissioner Moore, sorry. I should try and be a bit more formal.
Jerry.
That everything we're talking about is very expensive. We've talked about some taxing incentives and things I'm excited about. I'm looking forward to seeing us implement those. Enterprise zones, we're looking at reshaping those to try and incentivize things. It is very expensive. We'll see what happens. I'm optimistic we can do something to incentivize it and make it happen. And then there are 33,000 people, the majority of which live around downtown Crawfordville. Yeah. So there are people here that we could get here, and people, hundreds of thousands driving through our community in the summer on the weekends. Like, if we can get them to stop and go to an ice cream parlor and shop at the store next door instead of going just through our community, that's the goal. But there's a lot of things that have to do that. One of the things that I think Commissioner Moore brings to us is our push for jobs. Once we have people who work in Tallahassee during the day, so that businesses, it's impractical for some businesses when our entire community goes to Tallahassee. No one will shop in their store right now because there's no one here between 9 and 5. Well, some of us, yes, but the majority of people have gone to Tallahassee. Mass transit, Commissioner Hudson and I have discussed before. I love the idea of mass transit. I'm a huge fan of mass transit. Until Tallahassee has better mass transit, I don't think it's practical for Wakulla County beyond carpooling, because you get someone to Southwood and they can't leave their office at Southwood to go get lunch because there's no place near them for lunch. And that there would be enough to keep me from taking a bus, because I like to eat, and I like to eat well. I like the idea. I'm looking forward to one of the things I've had someone tell me recently that they're hoping to see come to Crawfordville, and I think it's true with the economy the way it is. There's shops on top, shops on the bottom, and people who live above the shop they own, because we just can't support financially what we used to support financially, people owning multiple pieces of property.
Design the exact thing you're talking about in the village of St. Mark's. I don't know if you've ever been there.
I
did that when I worked at Edwin Brown's. It's got the storage below. Of course, it's been a smashing failure, but
I bought into that. I bought that, and I sold it. And the restaurant has opened and closed 5 times. And I'm telling you about a mixed use. If you want to spend your money building it, have at it. The thing about it is on a mixed use, they get a bar and a band downstairs. You're not going to. I was able to sell before that happened. If I had not sold, I couldn't have sold.
And it depends what happens. I think we'll see what happens. Allowing it's a possibility. And lastly, but not leastly, because, again, time, I do always like to tell, I'll do this one for Hugh, who's videotaping us. One of the things that highlights the great state of Florida is our love of air conditioning. Gory, who was from Apalachicola, invented the air conditioning. Every state in the union gets to put 2 statues in Statuary Hall in Washington, D.C. One is a former Confederate soldier, general from Florida, who we should probably replace. But the other, who we recognize as someone who has made Florida possible, is Gory, the inventor of the air conditioning. It's one of the 2 people we recognize nationally. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll have the last word and we'll go, but Pam Portwood can tell you, and Lindsay can tell you, but further back, Pam, she and I were the first ones to sort of launch this whole idea of a sustainable community here in Crawfordville, a town center, and that was years ago. And all we've had a lot of meetings, like you said, John, not well attended, but and people don't come to those meetings because they have busy lives, because most of it's driving up and down 319. But I remember getting laughed out of the room when I tried to get the idea through of buying this property behind here and building a multi-level parking garage. Everybody thought I was crazy, and now it doesn't look like such a stupid idea. But you live and learn, and I still think it's a good idea. I think we need to. I support what you're trying to do. I think we need to do that here in the community. I think we need to get something on paper that people can see. I mean, until you show people what a conceptual idea is, they have no idea what you're talking about.
Remember you and I talked about.
Let me finish, Randy. Let me finish. The whole idea is to build a sustainable community. We tried to do it in the northeast of the county, and it got blown out. We spent that gentleman spent millions trying to support the very idea that you're preaching about now. I supported, and I still support, and I certainly support it here, and I think it's a wonderful idea, and I can't wait until we tear down all this blight we have right out here in Crawford. It's embarrassing, quite honestly. You know, I was encouraged when I started seeing Ron Mowry get the facade he put on that building and the old Ray Winkle store building. But the other junk needs to go or get repaired. And I agree that, you know, we need to build it here in the center. I'll do whatever I can to support it. I think we got to start moving ahead, and I agree with Randy that we got to put our money where our mouth is, and change the comp plan. Or live with the comp plan as it is. I agree with you that why can't we change it? And you're right. Every time we've tried to, people come in here and run us out of the room. And but if we all get together and stand united to do this, I think it's good for the community. I think it's good for anybody who owns property in this area. They're going to prosper, and the county will prosper. Building it in St. Mark's, it's all about location. Building it in St. Mark's was really a foolish idea. There's not many folks over there, and not many folks go visit over there. Had they built that same facility, I think, here, it would have been a success. But it's just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
That's right.
So
Guy has a lot of money.
yes, and I want to encourage that. So I'm behind you.
Basically, from where I came from and for what it's worth, if you build county facilities and you build them right in here or right here to the south where you have a lot of land, then you can drive this kind of development, because commercial you will have in 20 years you will have 3 times the government requirement of staff and whatever that you have today. So if you build south of here, then the commercial will build around it. Your community will then build closer to it. If you just don't spread your government buildings 10 blocks away and have them separated, you stay right. And here to the south is a wonderful place to expand your government, because you're going to need it. You're going to need it, and you just don't know how much you need. Your court system will occupy unbelievable amount of space.
Well, and we got. I cut Randy off a while ago, and I apologize. Go ahead, Randy.
2 things real quick. Remember you and I, about 6-8 years ago, were talking about doing incentives around the courthouse, either waiving building fees or waiving impact fees to try to get it.
Yep.
It just never happened. And Lindsay, didn't Ruta do a sustainable community comprehensive future land use?
That's what,
Yes.
Don't we have that now?
well, and that one was designed more specific to that NG Wade property.
But it is a future land use.
There is
isn't
a
it?
future land use category, but it was crafted.
It wouldn't do us any good for what we're talking about here then.
We could take a look at it and see if it could be tweaked a little bit. I honestly think that what we may want to do is just take we're really talking about building a town center here, and we can take a look at it.
I want to see us move forward. I'd really like to see us get off the dime and quit talking about it, but get some conceptual blueprint. You know, let's decide as a board. You're right. The courthouse is the center of our little town here, and say we want it to be however many miles around that, and just get. I mean, we have a talented staff that led by Lindsay Stevens, that I think can put this together for us, and so that we can. Start selling it to the public. The public wants it. I believe that. In what you're showing us here, it indicates that. So we got to move ahead another step and stop just talking about it and spending money on these studies. I want to see us do something.
And I think we have a timeline for moving forward, so.
It's just slower than we like, but we appreciate the awesome work that's coming out of it.
I have no problem with that. I agree with you, and I think the town plan that I saw last, which was, and you can give incentives to do this, as long as you don't require some things. If you start telling people where they got to do this and where they got to do that, that's a different animal. But if you give incentives, I think you can do that.
Okay. Any more discussion?
Well, and just one more final plug, a thank you going to the late Joy. Well, thank you first, Lynn, for the presentation tonight. And while we're talking about these things, we have to remember the people who came before us. Jewel Hudson people gave us plenty of green space in Wakulla County to build around also. And we're talking about, like, we don't have a town square, but we have a village green, and puts us a step ahead of other people.
You're right. I mean, we have what it takes to do what Lynn's proposing here, and I think we need to move in that direction.
County Central Park.
Anyway, any more? Is that it? All right. Any citizens to speak on it? Anybody? Come on up, Mary, so we can... No, you need to come to the mic so we can...
Presentation going to be on the site, on the website?
Could you come to the mic and repeat your question?
Jessica.
All of our meetings are recorded on the camera.
We don't normally put workshop items on there, but we can.
I just meant the presentation itself. Could that go on the website so we could refer to it at different times?
I'm happy to circulate it to you.
Okay,
No,
I'll
just-
take one then.
Okay,
Thank you.
sure.
Anybody else?
I was just going to mention that.
To the mic.
Mike. I know it's a pain, but we have to do this for record, guys.
We do need to put a sign in here that tells everyone they're getting videotaped.
Well, I'm just saying the same thing everybody said, I think, but, we've done lots of visioning, and I've been involved in visioning in every community in this county, not just the Crawfordville area, but everybody wants walkable. Everybody, they're all looking for those same things, places they can shop and dine. And by the way, visitors that come, as your Tourist Development Council Director, visitors that come, we have wonderful things for them to do to get out into nature and all that during the day. We have very little to really try to hold them here at night, build up our bed taxes, all that stuff, because they also want to be able to go to one kind of central place and go find something to eat and walk around the shops and that sort of thing. So I would really encourage moving forward, but I do just to, as we're moving forward, and it's probably questions you guys can answer, but what keeps coming up in conversations that I hear is, this is all what citizens want, but the bottom line is, who's gonna build it? And it's certainly can't all be, the infrastructure part can be up to government, and you can get some help with grants and things like that, but you have to get some developers who are willing and interested. And I guess I don't really get how to draw the right people to do the right thing, other than to try to get them in a room where all of their future customers will be, to say, hey, this is how we want it, and maybe then that would encourage them to do it. But just a little.
I think you got to have a board that's determined that this is what we want to do, and all agree. Be able to do what Jerry suggested, is offer incentives that will draw people here to do just that. Otherwise, it's a lost cause. And in this economy, it may be very hard, but when we come out of it, I want us to be ready to be able to do it.
Right.
Let me give you a brief example of the reality on the ground. John Shepard with the Radio Shack, it was right off Wakulla in there. You could see it from the road. When he moved from there to a storefront across from Walmart, his business shot through the roof. Just from people having to turn off the road and pull in. So that's the reality. I understand we want growth to go out, but if a business can't succeed 50 feet off the road, I think this needs to be a long term.
I can give you another example of the same thing, and I won't mention it. There was a particular business that moved from an out-of-sight location, off the road, but good location, but off the road, to a visible location, and the business went 4 times. Yeah, you can't do retail if people can't see you. They got to be able to see you.
But on the other hand, the office space, like it's off of Martin Luther King there, Title Closing Company that's down there, I think those are good offices.
That's a different animal.
Even though we're about to adjourn, one of the things Jerry talked about, and I talked about a little bit before he campaigned, is someday, if y'all ever have influence, we can get more offices down here, state buildings. I was about to say that Jerry talked about. But again, a lot of our employees, it's a bad time when they're firing 8,000 state employees, but if there ever are state employees again, having a building down here so that some of our people stay in the community during the day, so that people can open restaurants and people that are at restaurants. And once you have a restaurant, then you might want to open up a business of your own near the restaurant.
That's exactly right.
But we got to get something, in which we're all working towards trying to do, and I look forward to hearing more about incentives. Move to adjourn? Or whatever.
We're adjourned. Thank you.
Sorry.